Gareth Leather is an analyst at the Economist Intelligence Unit and joins us now for a look at the China story here. And Colin McLean is MD and CIO at SVM Asset Management and joins us as our guest host for the next hour. Gareth, let's start with you then, and the delegation that's in China making this high-profile commitment to China. He's trying to drive exports to China. Typically things move in the other direction, though. Typically China is exporting a lot of goods to us and not the other way around. How successful do you think he can be?
Certainly there's a lot of potential for the UK to export more to China. At the moment, in 2009, the UK actually exported 4 times more to Ireland than it did to China. And so clearly there's huge potential there. How much in this particular visit Mr Cameron's going to achieve is debatable, though, I think.
The trouble with a lot of these set-piece tours, I suppose, Colin, is that a lot of the announcements are made beforehand and then sort of repackaged up, and you're kind of expecting them to come. So they don't tend to positively surprise the market when they do arrive, these big sort of contract wins that can be announced.
It'll take a long time, and I doubt if many of the contracts will actually be concluded while they're there. So I think we see, though, in the scale of the India trip with Obama, just what needs to be done, and what we haven't seen perhaps in advance of this is the announcements of what we're taking to China, what we have to offer them. I'm not sure what it is we're giving to them.
What about what China has to offer to the world? And one of the things you've been looking at, Gareth, has been the growth of some of the less talked about cities in China. So not the top 3, but the tier below. Well, tell us what they are, because I think a lot of these cities won't even have been heard of by many people in the UK, and they're pretty sizable.
Yeah, certainly. For example, in 2009, when the rest of the world was experiencing quite a steep, nasty recession, China was actually booming. And a lot of this growth was being driven by inland cities, probably places that people in the UK and abroad wouldn't have actually heard of, such as Chongqing, Chengdu. These big cities of kind of 5 million plus people that are really kind of driving growth in China now, rather than the kind of cities on the eastern seaboard, such as Shanghai and Beijing, that probably people typically have heard of.
I have heard of those. Others I hadn't, though. Anshan, Manshan and Pingdingshan. These are in the CHAMPS acronym that you've come up with.
Yes, this is a report that we've published which really kind of aims to highlight the fact that China now, it's not just a kind of coastal phenomenon, but it's more kind of inland. And so if you're looking, for example, to sell mobile phones or cars to China, you may be looking to look at these markets which maybe aren't so saturated as the big ones along the eastern coast.
What does this mean then for those eastern coast big cities? I mean, that's still the centre of financial services, even if we see some of the manufacturing businesses moving inland, and as you say, some of the retail possibilities emerging inland.
Yeah, certainly it's not a problem for places like Shanghai and Beijing. They're still growing very quickly and developing very fast, but certainly more of the kind of the labour-intensive stuff, such as kind of manufacturing T-shirts and stuff, that's no longer done in Shanghai because labour costs are too expensive there. And in many ways that's a good thing, that people kind of initially get rich by making T-shirts and then they move kind of higher up the value-added chain. So that's a good thing for China, I think.
Some businesses, though, Colin, experience that wage inflation and then decide to move their manufacturing facilities entirely. We've seen countries like Vietnam and Bangladesh perhaps benefiting as a result of companies saying, well, look, these wage costs in China are actually too expensive. I mean, is that something that's overplayed as a phenomenon in the China story?
I think it's probably why China's holding off on any revaluation of its currency. I think it probably does recognise these inflationary pressures internally, and it's trying to allow for that. So I think it probably recognises that's happening.
OK, what about the ongoing development of infrastructure? Because that's something that's going to need to be in place if these second-tier cities are really going to deliver the potential for global exporters, like UK businesses, that you suggest they could do.
Yeah, certainly. I got back a couple of weeks ago from a trip to Chongqing, which is a kind of big hinterland city in the middle of China. And the infrastructure that's taking place there is really quite remarkable. If you look at the number of high-speed rail lines in China now, it's the longest in the world. Also, there's talk of kind of developing the Yangtze more so that the ships can go from the middle of China to the ports on the outside. And also there's even talk of developing a train line from China all the way to London, which is probably some years off, but it kind of gives you an idea of the scope of the ambitions of the Chinese government in terms of developing their infrastructure.
Gareth, thank you very much for joining us. Gareth Leather, analyst at the Economist Intelligence Unit.